Good morning, Springfield. It is great to be with you today, and I'm so glad you could join us for this, the second virtual edition of our monthly Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce gathering. It is a little bit unusual for me to be here without you again, but as you know, if you're a regular on Good Morning Springfield, I like to open by saying Good Morning Springfield, and then you say, and that's where it gets a little bit lonely for me in this case, because normally I like to hear about 400 great voices shouting back good morning. And I hope you're thinking that at home. Hope you're doing that at home today as well. So you might be joining us in one of two possible ways. One is by the Zoom link that was sent out to all of our members. And the other is everybody can watch us on Facebook Live. And I would encourage you, if either of those options is equally beneficial to you, there is a capacity limit on Zoom. So if you would like to, if it's just as easy for you to be on the Facebook page, please go ahead and switch over. Watch us on Facebook Live, and you can join that as well. And as always, we try to encourage people to share what's going on here, what you're learning, the information that you're gathering, and the kinds of things that you can share with your friends on your social networks. As you do that, I'd like to encourage you to use our hashtag. That's hashtag GoodMorningSGF. And as always, we want you to share those insights and perspectives and observations. And in this case, you can actually share the broadcast itself. So go ahead and share this Facebook Live under the hashtag GoodMorningSGF. A lot has changed since the past month when we were last together for Good Morning Springfield. And while we would certainly prefer to be meeting in person, we're so grateful that we can still gather virtually for these timely updates and the updates that come from a number of leaders on the front lines of the fight against the coronavirus and to work to reopen our economy safely. Before we get to those updates, I would like to thank our sponsors and our host for this morning as well. First, thank you to our series presenting sponsor, BKD Wealth Advisors. They are one of the most generous community partners that you'll ever find, and we're very, very happy to have them as that ongoing partner as well. We're going to have an opportunity to learn more with BKD Wealth Advisors Principal and Chief Investment Officer Jeffrey Lehman, who's going to be with us a little bit later in the program. We're also grateful, continue to be very grateful to the great team here at Digital Monitoring Products. DMP is once again really providing us with this exceptional opportunity to come to you from their studios here. They're providing this live stream for us. I want to thank them for it. It's really indicative of the strength and resilience of this wonderful local company, this manufacturer that does so much for our community and for our chamber. Our monthly sponsor for this month is Borough Behavioral Health, and this is a timely connection because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but it is also well-timed because access to mental health services is such a vital part of keeping our region protected and healthy during this crisis. So joining me now is President and CEO of Borough Behavioral Health, Dr. C.J. Davis. C.J., glad to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your leadership through this challenging time as well. And I know that the access to behavioral health services has been priority one for you and for your whole team right now. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about some of the work that Borough's doing and some of the mental health considerations that people need to be thinking about right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt, for having me, and good morning, Springfield. I've been talking publicly about the second public health crisis that's sure to follow the COVID crisis, and that's an increased number of individuals in our community suffering, mostly in silence, from mental health related concerns. We know that people are isolated and lonely, and we know that somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 75% of us, of your employers, your employees, our loved ones, are experiencing a concerning mental health condition right now. Interestingly enough, for every 1% increase in unemployment is a corresponding 1.6% increase in suicide. We also know that there's a tremendous amount of substance misuse occurring, and people are scared to leave their home. They're scared to go to work. They're scared to go to public places, Matt. And what we're beginning to learn from some data is that there's a new term that's been published by a research group out of Colorado, and it's called deaths of despair. And we're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 150,000 more deaths over the coming year as a result of suicide and substance misuse. So if you think about this, we are really facing unprecedented times, and mental health, ironically, during Mental Health Awareness Month, is becoming more important than it's ever been before. And I really encourage people to embrace this because we know from historic pandemics, most recently SARS, that those mental health symptoms can last somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 3 years.
Well, it just kind of makes, as I think about that and listen to those really sobering numbers, the thing that occurs to me, CJ, is how grateful I am to be in a community that has been elevating this discussion about mental health already. And that's mean, that's largely your leadership of Borough Behavioral Health. During May as Mental Health Awareness Month, I guess, what are some things that people can know about how to best connect with your organization and how they can get help if they need to?
Yeah, and the question really is how do we flatten that mental health, public health crisis curve? And flattening that second curve, we always say to remain in care and engage in care. And right now, Matt, you have the ability to receive telephonic or telehealth services from the comfort of your home. Anybody can. So if there's somebody that needs service, that if you recognize that they're struggling, referring them to a mental health professional is extremely important. We also have the ability to connect with each other. While we live in isolation, every single day we have a what we call Be Well Facebook community meeting. And that allows you to connect with other people, talk about mental health related concerns that we're all encountering. And whether you refer somebody, whether you contract out with us for EAP services, we have services available. Of course, we just announced that we have a behavioral crisis center that we just opened. Thankful to the county leadership, the city leadership to deal with psychiatric and addictions crisis. So there is help out there, Matt. Nobody needs to struggle in silence.
CJ, thanks so much for your leadership and for the leadership of Rural Behavioral Health.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, appreciate it so much. Such an asset to our community in so many ways. We just are so grateful for to be in a community that actually has this emphasis and the ability to focus on these mental health needs and has tremendous resources in the community like Borough Behavioral Health. Well, we are going to move now. Grateful for an update today that we're going to receive from our mayor. Springfield Mayor Ken McClure is with us. And Mayor, thank you so much for your leadership during this time, bringing together so many stakeholders during this crisis and welcoming the input and expertise of the business community. So I would just say on behalf of the business community, I want to thank you for that. I know that that's been a priority of yours from the beginning, is hearing those needs and trying to be as responsive as possible in absolutely unprecedented time. So as we take these steps that are underway to reopen our economy, which I know is important to you to do safely, what can we do to help you and other community leaders really successfully navigate this recovery process?
Well, Matt, thank you for having me, and good morning, Springfield. It's a delight to be here. Let me first start by saying the Chamber has played such an important role throughout this crisis as we've been trying to work with businesses who have just been impacted in such an unprecedented way. We realize that, and no one likes that. But how do we work with them? The Chamber has been such an asset in trying to provide information on services available from various units of government, also in terms of what the needs are of the business community. So I thank you for that. And in terms of the help, what we encourage our business to do is continue to be innovative. That's one of the strengths that we see in our business community. They're able to adapt to certain situation, and we're just so pleased with that. So I would encourage that to be able to continue. Secondly, we want to be able to continue our step down, and that's going to be based upon good, firm data. And so we're asking our businesses pay attention to that. But as we take those steps, let's make sure that we follow what the guidelines are and make sure that we're all safe through that. So I'm excited as we continue to start looking at a step down now, but also it's driven by data. And that's the key thing right now. When we started this several weeks ago, we were looking at projections. Well, now we're able to have good firm data. So that type of assistance. But again, thanks so much to the Chamber for your daily interaction.
Well, I would just say I want to return the thanks to you, Mayor, and tell you how grateful I am for the way our leadership at the city, but also county commission and all of these partners who are involved in this, our health department, have been very responsive. There's even to the extent where step one of the step out of the stay-at-home order was issued, and upon receiving constructive feedback, even a few days later, able to be amended when there are ideas, innovation, just as you described, that provide that safe way of coming out. So I'm so grateful for that. I think our partnership really comes to the top, into the limelight during times like these.
Well, it really does. You've referenced our relationship with the county, but certainly our healthcare facilities. Borough is another example with Dr. Davis that's been here. Partnerships and collaboration is not just a watchword. It's never been needed more than it is now. But that good communication, being able to get the feedback, so critical, and I'm so grateful.
So I want to ask you something that I know that you've been kind of, as a student of history, you've been looking at this too. And I will say, I think we both agree once every 100 years is plenty for something like this. But you did look at this Spanish flu epidemic from more than 100 years ago, 1918. And it was striking that some of the things that you learned. What did you see about how Springfield worked through that?
Well, in 1918, there was a Spanish flu outbreak nationwide. And interestingly enough, there was an article in the Springfield newspaper at the time, September 15 of 1918, that said, influenza not here yet. It's basically on the East Coast. 2.5 weeks later, Mayor Gideon at the time had to issue an executive proclamation declaring a state of emergency, essentially closing our churches, our restaurants, our schools, our theaters, all kinds of mass gatherings. And that was in place for 5.5 weeks. And so, interestingly, to me, was to look at the guidelines in place on how to deal with the influenza, very similar to what we're talking about now with COVID-19.
Wow, that is remarkable how many things have changed and others still, the tried and true is the way. I also want to ask you, and I think this is probably helpful for people to understand. We're under an emergency declaration, which grants an unusual level of authority to a mayor of Springfield in a situation like this, which means you can make a lot of these decisions and do make these decisions. They need to be made quickly. They need to happen on the spot and real time. And so that authority is just rests in the mayor's hands as opposed to a whole council action. But what are you doing? What are some things that you do to try to make sure that you're not isolated, that you're able to make good decisions?
Well, we talk about the collaboration, and that means sharing information back and forth. We get good health data, not only from our Springfield Greene County Health Department, but also from our healthcare facilities. We talk with business leaders through the chamber, through others. We talk with our county colleagues. We talk with others throughout the state. The governor's been very good about convening regular calls with the mayors of the 6 largest cities. And so these decisions are not made in a vacuum. They're made only with a lot of consultation and input from a lot of people. Just tomorrow, for example, we'll be having a public council study session talking about the proposals that the health department's working on what the continued step down looks like. And it's important that we not only look out for the next 2 to 4 weeks, but hopefully beyond that we know there are a lot of summer activities that are always planned. What can people expect on that? And they deserve to know an answer, recognizing that this thing can change very quickly. And so we need to be able to act quickly, promptly if need be, but we want to try to give some guidance. So I'm grateful for all of the input that we get. Yes, the responsibility under our city code rests with the mayor, but only after getting a lot of good input and feedback.
So I want to zero in on that opportunity that is tomorrow, meeting with City Council as a study session. That's a public event, so people can learn a little bit about, even before this is an order that's official, about what the specifics are of the next steps that are under consideration.
Our goal is to issue a new order sometime next week that takes the next steps on stepping down. But what does that look like? And our health department, again, is just doing a great job in trying to plan out. So we want to lay out those plans, have discussion with Director Goddard and his staff, see exactly what makes sense for our community, and then get feedback from that. It will be a virtual meeting, as our council meetings have been the last few weeks, but certainly it's available to the public. We would encourage the public to watch and hopefully try to learn a little bit from the presentation from the health department.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for doing that. We're going to talk to Director Goddard a little bit later today as well, as we can get a little bit of insight on the health metrics and things that are happening there. But I just want to thank you for your leadership and for making that accessible. Chamber members, you'll be hearing more from us and from the city about how you can tune into that on tomorrow's study session and learn more about those next steps so that businesses can be as prepared as possible as they move through. Mayor, I want to thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for being here today. And also a big thank you, because not all of those collaborators you described can be here together at the same time. So Greene County Presiding Commissioner Bob Dixon, the other commissioners, the other members of City Council, our health department, city and county staff, just tremendous focus and leadership during this unprecedented time. And so as you've journeyed through this, what's been an encouragement to you?
A lot of encouragements. First, we know we have good, sound healthcare facilities, and they've clearly stepped up. By taking the actions that we've taken as a community, we've allowed them to build their resources. So kudos to them. Secondly, I want to thank our not-for-profit community. We always have strong not-for-profits in Springfield and Greene County, but the United Way of the Ozarks, the Community Foundation of the Ozarks, the Community Partnership of the Ozarks have led the way in convening a lot of nonprofits. We have a strong faith community. They've helped establish what we call having faith initiatives, and over 80 pastors pastors of different denominations, all kinds of faith traditions, stepping forward to provide services throughout our community. So I'm just so pleased with that. Our community is stepping up in this very difficult time. We know how hard it is. There isn't a single person in Springfield and Greene County that has not been impacted by this. And so I'm so proud of the way we're responding, but I do recognize all of the challenges that we have.
Well, no question about it. Thank you, but thank you so much for your leadership, Mr. Mayor, and for the continued work and partnership that you have in our community. Well, so lots to keep up with at the local level, lots of information, lots of things to keep up with there, but also a lot to happen at the state level. A lot of information that we need to gather there as well. And we're very, very fortunate today to have joining us live remotely is Missouri Governor Mike Parson. Throughout his tremendous career in statewide public service, he's been a wonderful partner for both this Chamber of Commerce and also to the broader business community. His administration has made addressing COVID-19 pandemic their number one top priority, as you have seen, from public health crisis to the economic impacts that great challenges of our time as we have ever faced as a state during this time. As we have him join us, I also want to acknowledge Department of Economic Development Director Rob Dixon and Department of Labor Director Anna Hugh, who we will have an opportunity to hear from a little bit later next week. Anna Hugh will be joining us for a public policy speaker series that we'll talk more about later. But both of these and so many others as a part of the governor's administration have just been incredibly helpful, answering employer questions in real time since day one and providing that assistance right on the ground. It's so important to reopen the economy and to protect the public health. I want to invite certainly Governor Parson to be with us now. Do we have him live? I'll go ahead and just welcome Governor Parson. Governor, it's great to see you.
Good morning, Matt. This is kind of the first one of these calls I've done, so it's a little unusual for me not be face to face, but great to talk to people from Springfield, Missouri this morning.
Well, we are honored to be in that position, and obviously so grateful for your leadership and for your friendship in so many ways here. I know that it's so important to you and to our members as well to reopen the economy and at the same time protect the public health. Delicate balance, and those depend on each other so much. Data about the health of Missourians, I know, is also driving your administration's decisions, including the move to put stay-at-home orders in place last month and the decision to begin reopening and recovery earlier this month. Governor, truly appreciate you joining us. Could you just give us an update on where the state stands with the response to COVID-19?
Sure, Matt. First of all, let me just say I heard the mayor on there before I got on. I just want to thank the mayor for what he's doing down there and for what all the leadership in Greene County and Springfield's done. Springfield's been one of those first areas that we were deeply concerned with when this all took off. But again, like always, seems like people in Southwest Missouri, it comes back to hard work, people dedicated to their jobs, dedicated to be public servants. And I think you just seen how that all paid off for us in Southwest Missouri. I do want to give a special shout out. Dr. Trotman, that's there, has been on the infectious disease panel for I think we're going on 8 weeks, where him and other doctors around the state have been an advisory council to me. And I tell you, that's just been invaluable, and for the knowledge he had and how he helped. So I really want to give a shout out to him and tell him thanks on that. Before I get into the economy side of it, we'll talk about COVID-19. I sometimes sit here in the office and wonder what happened to January when the economy was booming. We were trying to look for people to fill jobs, and how quick life changes for all of us that none of us seen this coming or really knew how to deal with it at first. But I do want to say this again, people in the state stepped up, did what they needed to do to try to control a virus as much as we possibly could. And we did that. And when you look at other states around us, when you look on the national level, you're going to find out at the end of the day, Missouri did a pretty good job of dealing with this virus. Some of the things I want to kind of get to some things that's looking better every day. Where we started out, the numbers are going down. The positive cases are going down. And at the same time, we're doing more testing than we ever have. So that's a really good sign. The number you see a lot of times the media will put out there will be the number that there's over 10,000 people tested positive for the COVID-19. I think it's really important to remember that probably 90% of that number people have already recovered or are recovering now. So that number is just a continuing number from March the 7th when this first started. For here at the office, we've been here every day since the beginning. We did 50 some odd briefings since this all started for the first 40, 45 days. We were here 7 days a week, just trying to get a handle on this, trying to see what we could do, and really try to figure out the one thing I've learned out of all of this, and this is something, Springfield, Matt, for you and the chamber members, there'll be some opportunities out of this too. But one thing I did realize is we were totally dependent on other states or other foreign countries to get supplies in for us. We were totally dependent on them. I don't ever want to be in that situation again as governor. So we're really going to take a real good look at finding manufacturers within the state that can make a lot of this equipment, and we're going to do whatever we can to help that system and to make sure we can provide for ourselves. That is critical number one. So we'll be prepared for this going down the road. So again, that's business opportunity. Those jobs are out there. We need to take advantage of that. We just got a call a couple of times from the White House. I've been on the call with the White House 2 times a week with the Vice President, President, both been on those calls the majority of the time. One of the things that we did a Google Marketplace early on in the state. And what we did is we matched up the medical institutions with the private sector to buy equipment. And that picked up a little national attention and become a best practice for the state. And then around the state that the White House picked up, they called us this week talking about if we would be willing to look at manufacturers in the state of Missouri that would be willing to maybe step forward and retool their companies to be able to make some of this equipment. And that the federal government would probably maybe could help with that with contracts and different things. So that was positive news for us here in the state. So some good things coming out of this. The one thing we have learned about the coronavirus, which most of you know, is how to target it now. How do we do what we call a box-in strategy? So if we have an outbreak in a nursing home, or as you've seen in St. Joe, the meat processing company, we can now go up there and target those people and test like 3,000 people over a weekend to get that done. So all of that's going to help. And the reason I say those things is because that's going to give consumer confidence. Because right now we got to make sure that the public, one, understands that it's okay to go back out. But the number one thing that I could stress to everybody on this call this morning is social distancing. That has to be part of our plan as we engage in the economy. However you look at it, however people think that, no, I don't have to do that, it's silly, they might very well think that. But I'm telling you, it is the key to us moving forward and to continue to move forward in this state. So anytime we're talking about anything, I think that's important to stress that social distancing part of that. So we're doing that. A lot of things in the state we're getting caught up on PPE gear, and we're getting much more prepared to be able to handle the virus. There's no doubt the virus is going to be here. It's going to be here for a while, and that's not going to change. So we got to open up the economy. We got to go back to work, and we got to deal with the virus. That's simple. But we do that on a daily basis with a lot of other things when it comes to diseases and things like this. This one just caught us a little off guard, but we're getting much better on how to handle it. As far as the economy goes, I don't think I need to tell you what kind of record numbers we've had over here. We've had a record number of unemployments that we've never seen before in the state system, to the tune of over 400,000 people on unemployment rates. There is a little bit of a good sign to that. I want to be careful about putting too many good signs out there, but actually the numbers are starting to go down just a little bit. Not as many people filing, and part of that is back to reopen the economy. People are going back to work. People are getting called back. And as I traveled the state last week, different to Hy-Vee stores in Springfield, matter of fact, me and my family actually at my daughter for Mother's Day, we ate at the Outback one day. People were abiding by the rules. They were very conscious of the customer and the employees. And as we went through these businesses and we really seen how people were operating, it was pretty impressive to see good people doing the right things here. So, but I do think that could be the changes that we're going to have to adapt to get the economy going. What is crucial is that we have to do both. We have to be able to do the balance and act between this virus and the economy. We can't do one or the other. We're going to have to deal with both of them. So as we move forward, we've got to get people back to work. Number one, we've got to get people to open those businesses back up. And that's going to be somewhat of a slow process. I mean, that's not something that we're just all of a sudden going to go open up and everybody goes back to work and customers are there. I think gradually we'll have to build into this a little bit. We're going to have to make sure that we still give people the opportunity to be active. People are going to want to do things. Kids are going to want to do things this summer. So we got to prepare for that. And we got to be smart about how we do that. So I think all of those things are important as the order that we have in the state. And I know Ken, I heard him talking about a little bit on the local order there. You know, we're looking at June the 1st, but it'll be an evaluation. As this month goes forward, we're looking at numbers every day here at Jeff City and just trying to focus on what does the data tell us and where do we really need to go. For the most part, the entire state is in really good shape. With the exception, St. Louis region, we know that's a hot spot up there. Kansas City has a little bit of spikes up there that we got to deal with. But again, we're much more prepared now to deal with that situation than what we were 30 days ago on that. So the one thing I'll just tell you, because you're all from down in Springfield, Missouri, you guys have all heard the phrase and damned if you do and damned if you don't. I've lived that scenario now for about 60 days. It seems like every decision you made, there was the good and the bad with it. But I want every one of you to know this. Every day I come to work here in this office, along with my people that worked in this office, nobody got to stay at home. They had to come to work because we knew we had a job to do for the people of this state. And we continued to do that day in and day out. And I never did really respond to what the media thought. I didn't respond to what social media thought. I really every day tried to look at the data I had in front of me, what was really happening. I listened to the doctors that were the experts on the ground here in Missouri, you know, and that was important to me. And that's how we made the decisions. And again, you know, we're heading in the right direction, but we all got to do our part. We all got to do, you know, Director Dixon was at a briefing the other day. We're talking about how we're going to engage the economy again, what we're going to do for workforce development, because we're going to have to retool the workforce. And that's just all there is to it. I mean, so what we were doing training 6 months ago, what the community colleges, what the universities were doing, you know, we're going to have to even retool that again and realize that there's going to be a different way we do business, a different way we do jobs. And we're going to have to be prepared for that. So in again, doing multiple things at the same time, we got to do to get the economy going back. So, but it's great to be on today. Great to talk to people from Springfield, and just thank you for what you're doing down there in part of the state. It's hard to beat common sense and hard work, and that's two of the values I know comes out of Southwest Missouri. So, Matt, let me turn it back over to you and be glad to answer some questions. I got a little time this morning, so if you want to ask some questions, we'll be glad to answer some.
Well, Governor, I can't thank you enough for just taking that time with us. It's been, I know it has to be such a crush of pressure on all sides. And as you develop more data, as more information becomes available, as we monitor and work through this, it does feel like there's some direction coming in terms of recovery and thinking both short term and long term. You mentioned workforce development as one of those key steps for long term recovery. Are there other steps for long term recovery we should be thinking about?
Yeah, you know what, man? I think one of the things we still need to put a great deal of emphasis on is infrastructure. You know, and the reason I say that is one of the things we're trying to do through the budget is trying to figure out how we can keep as much money as we can. And believe me, it's going to be some tough times ahead for the budget product for here in the state. But we still got to do work. If we can keep those transportation contracts out there, if we can keep people teaching, if we can keep people in the classrooms, we can keep those opportunities for people to go to work, that on-the-job training, that's critical for us. So, you know, as we move forward, when we have to make some of the decisions on the state, I tell my department heads all the time that, look, you got to be thinking, how do you create jobs as we go through this process? So, you know, you don't want to eliminate money and all of a sudden you've eliminated a bunch of jobs to do with that. So infrastructure is key. And I think as we see the housing market, as we see the roads, the bridges, we need to continue to try to do as much as we can, especially on the local levels too, as much as we can.
Governor, you mentioned the budget, and obviously there's been significant financial impact to the state budget through all of this, as well as the economy is restrained through this period. I know that creates all kinds of pressures as you're preparing next year's budget. The legislative session has been working on that. They're going to finish up their session tomorrow. I guess a quick question I might ask you on this concept of a Wayfair fix or an internet sales tax to level the playing field with local business. Might there be some help for the state from a revenue perspective that way as well?
Yeah, well, you know what? I wish they would get passed. I wish that would have been a priority. You know, I've supported that all along. I think that is a huge issue for our state. And I don't know what's going to make it across the finish line. It's there in the legislature. They're trying to do things. But that should have probably been one of the most key things we did legislatively wise to help our state. But I don't know. We'll look at what opportunities we have to do on Wayfair. we got to get that fixed. I mean, it's just, and if there was ever a time that we're going to pay a price for it, it's going to be during this virus, how that's going to affect our state. And every one of us that's on here today, just think about how many people has went out there and spent money outside our state, which understandably so, you're at home. But if we'd had the opportunity to be able to do that here in state and kept our state going at the same time, would have been a great opportunity. But unfortunately, that's not the way it is. I would like to see it get done, but we got 2 days to try to get it done. So, and then on the budget side of it, you know, man, I got to be honest with you, to the people out there. I mean, there's a lot of more work to do on the budget. You know, I think people come in here and they try to kind of put a budget together, but I just got to make sure everybody understands we're going into a critical time. I don't know that we even make it to June without more withholds, and I can guarantee you on the 1st of July there will be things that we're going to have to be. We're just going to have to work on. We're going to be doing withholds in July. I don't think there's any doubt about that, unless the federal government comes in and, you know, has another CARE Act or some more money. But I don't know that we can really count on that at all.
Well, Governor, I again just can't thank you enough for your leadership, for your commitment, for getting up every day and facing this. Also want to pay a quick compliment to your team, wonderful cabinet department heads, as you've mentioned. Department of Economic Development Director Rob Dixon has been a tremendous partner on the ground, and his whole team through this entire process. And Anna Hughes is going to be with us next week for a public policy speaker series, so we're going to get an update directly with our members on some of the labor issues as well.
Yeah, good, Matt. Thank you. Let me just brag on my directors for a minute. You know, most of these directors were here when I got here, and just they are some really sharp people doing some outstanding work. And when you look, whether it's Department of Correction, we've been so fortunate in our correction institution. We've not had more problems than we've had there compared to other states. Director Hugh, again, got into the most unemployment numbers we've ever had in our state's history. And while other state systems were totally going down, we kept ours going under her direction. We brought hundreds of people in during this entire time to prop that system up. We got call services that we called out to and got businesses in there. And we had to do that. And right before that, it was the Department of Health was overwhelmed with the virus, with the testing and everything. And we brought in another 100 people, more call centers in to be able just to handle the load. And I wish I could explain to you just how overwhelming that was here. And you got all my directors doing that. The office here, we had people in here 14, 16 hours a day answering the phone constantly, 7 days a week. It was just incredible, what we were dealing with here. But again, I want to thank my directors. They all stepped up. Director Dixon, Hugh, I mean, Hugh's going down the list. They've all done great. Director Parson of Public Safety, SEMA. It's just, it's been incredible. I've been totally impressed with them. Because, you know, you always get the best test of who people are when they can handle a crisis and how do they deal with it and how they get it through it. So, and you guys well know that. You went through that down there in Springfield with what you're doing, Matt, with what the mayor did, what the county did. And with your medical, I'm just telling you, we took a lot of our medical institutions in Southwest Missouri for granted. I'm going to tell you that. I did for a long time. I knew that they were there. We've got excellent doctors. We've got excellent nurses. But I'm telling you, Southwest Missouri shined in this whole ordeal of how they handled this situation.
Well, thank you so much, Governor. Thanks for your leadership, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. You should do more of these. You're good at them.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's my first one. I don't know. Hey, you guys see the First Lady out. Say hello to her, because she's been kind of shut up for about 60 days, so I'm kind of in the doghouse over that. So somehow I got to get her back out a little bit.
We'll send a well visit out. We'll check on her.
All
Thanks
right,
so much, Governor.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Well, wonderful, of course, to have Governor Parson with us today and be able to kind of work through some of these things. It's a big issue hitting us at all levels, local, state, and every other place as well. And of course, it hits the business community also. And so it's at this point just a great privilege and honor to bring back our chairman of the board of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, Robin Robeson, for a quick update. First, just want to thank you, Robin, for your leadership during this time. It's not what you planned on, but you've really risen to the occasion, and this is remarkable. And of course, as I would expect, way.
Well, it's been my pleasure. It's been my privilege.
You have helped us pivot immediately to focus as a Chamber of Commerce on urgent needs for our members and the business community. And just with that chairman of the board hat on, I guess I'd ask you to summarize what you feel like has been the Chamber's most important function during this time on behalf of the business community.
Sure. Well, we talk a lot about the chamber being a trusted convener. That's not a new, those aren't new words that we've used. And that certainly has been one of our defining strengths. But I believe that in this situation, our members and our community leaders have really most needed us to function as a representative voice, as a reliable source, and as a prudent filter. And, representative voice, what do I mean when I say that? Well, what I mean is that the chamber has conducted intentional and direct outreach to members. Many members have also reached out to us, resulting in more than 1,000 interactions. So that's a lot of interactions. And what we've learned from our members is invaluable. No one knows better than the business owners and the business leaders how their businesses operate. And no one has a bigger stake in protecting the health of their employees and their customers than they do. And so we've been able to have those interactions and then provide that feedback and that technical intelligence in an ongoing way to our leaders to influence policy. So public health expertise driven by local data and then combined with local business operational understanding, I think has really led to innovation and successful solutions. And this is, I believe, one of the finest examples of the value proposition of the chamber. And there are many reasons why I believe it's important to invest in the chamber. And even if none of those other reasons existed, this would be reason enough for me to want to pay my membership dues year after year. And Matt, no other local organization really carries the water that the chamber does, and it's not easy. But we're not the only networking organization in town or the only one to provide useful information, but the chamber is the only advocate in this unique way to represent our business community and to make sure that they have a seat at the table and that they're heard when policy is being made directly and it affects their ability to do business. And I don't think there's any better example than the conversation that you had last week with Jeff Schrag on your coronavirus video update. I mean, I think that was it's one example. There are many others, but that was a great example. So, for us being that representative voice right now, I just want to assure our members that, your voice is heard and it's being heard at the table when important decisions are being made.
As I hear you describe that, I know you agree with me and how blessed we are to have a community that's willing to receive that, that kind of
Yes.
constructive input from the business community. So it has been a collaborative effort, but I'd like to zero in on a couple of other things you mentioned in that answer. This concept of the chamber as a reliable source and a prudent filter. Could you talk more about that?
Sure. Well, those two things really go hand in hand. The chamber is always engaged in curating information, and they have access, to the experts that benefit our members, and that's really benefited us during this crisis, and that function has really been in overdrive. And if we let ourselves, we could become completely overwhelmed, and I have been overwhelmed a few times by the fire hose of information that's just coming at us on a daily basis. And I've heard from so many of our members who are grateful for the ways in which the chamber is working each day, every day, to really distill and provide accurate information in as timely a way as possible. So the chamber's, goal has been to get information quickly, but it's not a competition. We want to get it quickly, but we also want to make sure that it's properly vetted and sourced. So what I hear from our members is when they get information that comes from the chamber, they know that they can really count on it as being true and being correct because it has been vetted and sourced. But there's a lot of different ways, that the chamber's been working for our members as a reliable source and a prudent filter during this crisis. And I just want to mention a few things. It's not a complete list, but it's some of the highlights that I think are really important. So right away, we created the special coronavirus webpage and got that updated. It's very user-friendly, and it's on our site at springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus. We also produce 6 access to the experts and decision makers conference calls providing really timely update and answers to our members' questions. And combined, more than 1,000 callers have joined us for those programs. 1,000 callers, can you imagine that? Who would have ever thought that? And there's more of those to come. So just some examples, we had U.S. Senator Josh Hawley, we had House Speaker Elijah Har and Senator Lincoln Huff. We had a PPP loan webinar with the Small Business Development Center. And the great thing is even if our members were not able to see those in real time, most of that is out there on our coronavirus webpage and can be consumed, at their convenience. So that's great. We've had 9 weekly coronavirus update videos featuring really top takeaways from business for the week. You've been doing those.
Yeah.
We come to expect those on Friday afternoons now. And then nearly 30 COVID-19 related email updates with breaking news about newly available resources, summaries of links to new local orders, and really other urgent guidance that businesses are needed. We've also had 8 weekly COVID-19 policy updates from our public affairs team. Public affairs team has still been very busy, containing really the latest in-depth news about decisions at the local, state, and federal level. And then we've had 2 free virtual 60 Minutes to Success workshops for small businesses. And those have been focused on marketing and communication with customers and the public as they prepared to open. So, the chamber's pretty humble, and I know that you would never say this, but as your volunteer leader, I'm going to say this. I think that the way the chamber staff has been able to pivot and provide this great access to information and the way that we've done outreach to members makes me so proud, to be in this role this year. So thank you very much.
That's very kind of you, Robin. I would say it all starts with our leaders who represent the business community, and you're at the very top of that list right now, certainly. And so, and while we're doing that, while we're pivoting to try to make sure that we're being responsive and addressing in real time those needs of this crisis, other work goes on too, right? So
Yes.
And thank goodness for it. There are times it's really nice to be able to focus on
We need some other
of those
distractions.
things, right? So yeah, from advocacy, economic development, workforce development, talk a little bit about some of what has been going on.
Sure. Well, the 2020 legislative session started out very strong. Boy, we were really hopeful. And then as everything with COVID-19, it quickly became very uncertain. The legislative session and what would be accomplished became very uncertain. But after a few breaks, the legislature did reconvene at the end of last month, and they've been hard at work since then, prioritizing the completion of the budget first and foremost, which is what you would expect. And I know that the Chamber Public Affairs staff and you personally, have been very engaged and advocating on our business members' behalves. And so we're happy to celebrate a few important legal reforms and some significant workforce development legislation that's come across the finish line and is headed to the governor's desk to sign. But as Governor Parson just said, there are still 2 days left in the session, and a lot can happen in 2 days, right?
It usually does.
Yes, so we're expecting a lot of good things to happen in these next 2 days, but we're really closely monitoring the progress on the internet sales tax proposal, or the Wayfair tax, enabling legislation for tourism projects, and then the establishment of a prescription drug monitoring program. And if those 3 things can get across the finish line in the next 2 days, I think that it will be considered a very successful session, all things considered. And so we hope to have more good news for our members here coming in the next couple of days.
I mean, just 2-3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have given it a snowball's chance.
I know,
Yeah,
me too.
That's great news. Well, Robin, thank you so much for your leadership in so many ways through all of this difficult challenge and just generally for the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Robin. Well, next up, we want to hear from one of our other partners here in the community that we tend to hear regular updates from on Good Morning Springfield, and that's Springfield Public Schools. What an incredible response we have seen from our local school districts and district leaders and the faculty and staff, and helping students continue to learn during these circumstances, helping their families to continue to provide nutrition and food for these students as they go through this time as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this update from Springfield Public Schools.
Good morning, Springfield. The past 2 months have taken us on an interesting journey. Faced with the unusual circumstances caused by COVID-19, we knew that our 25,000 students and their families would need our support more than ever. With the goal of serving as a stabilizing force during this uncertain time, the SPS team found creative ways to stay connected with students and parents so that learning could continue through the last day of the school year. To support virtual learning, we created the SPS at-home learning platform, deployed student learning devices, and approximately 2,000 internet hotspots for those without reliable service. Teachers connected with students via web conferencing, email, personal telephone calls, and other creative strategies to provide instruction every day. We engaged with our seniors to find new ways to celebrate the class of 2020 since circumstances ruled out commencement exercises in May. We honored their feedback and rescheduled senior events like prom and graduation and project graduation so they can physically come together with family and friends to celebrate this important milestone. In August, we're hopeful to see our 1,600 SPS seniors walk down the aisle to pomp and circumstance. Beyond the learning needs of our students, we're serving free grab-and-go meals to ensure that our children have access to nutritious food. In a period of just 6 weeks, we've served nearly 360,000 meals. That includes 22,000 gallons of milk, 17,000 pounds of fruit, and 91,000 pounds of vegetables. That food goes a long way in helping families who might be facing financial challenges during this time. Our counselors and nurses are also connecting parents with resources that can help address health, mental wellness, or other needs they may experience. To support parents who work in roles essential to our community's emergency and medical response efforts, SPS also provided daycare services for their children. On average, we're serving about 85 students a day. This summer, learning will continue with online classes offered through Explore2Go and Launch. Custom curriculum will allow elementary students to make virtual visits to national parks. Middle school students can choose online classes that let them explore their own interest. And high school students will be able to choose from more than 80 online classes through our Launch program. Students may enroll now for the June session. As we've adapted to meet these unforeseen circumstances, we've also moved forward with other important work. Facility improvement projects funded by Proposition S are all on budget and on schedule. By the time school begins, August 24th, Delaware Elementary School, the Ada Fulbright Early Childhood Center, and Sunshine Elementary School will be finished and ready to welcome students. Construction of other projects like Boyd and Williams Elementary Schools and the renovation of Hillcrest High School will begin this summer. The past few months have been challenging at times, but it's been inspiring to see the commitment, dedication, and compassion demonstrated by the entire SPS team. I'm proud of their efforts and the positive impact they've had on our community during uncertain times. I've witnessed the same heroic work by employees of our government agencies, community organizations, and business community. United, we pulled together in a crisis and provided the support our citizens needed. It makes me proud to call Springfield home. Thank you to our community for ongoing support of Springfield Public Schools and for all you do to continue to help meet the needs of our students. Have a good day.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jungman, for your leadership, and thank you for Springfield Public Schools for the many ways that you have helped young people to continue learning, not only here, but statewide. Such a leader and a collaborator in our community. Thanks so much for your leadership. Really pleased now to turn to Jeff Lehman, who is joining us from BKD Wealth Advisors. He's Principal and Chief Investment Officer. And of course, BKD Wealth Advisors is just a tremendous partner, community supporter in so many ways. And they're the annual sponsor of Good Morning Springfield, and we're grateful to have you with us today and for the support, the continued support of Good Morning Springfield. Going to lean on your depth of professional expertise this morning, Jeff. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it very much, and Good Morning Springfield again. The impact on the economy of COVID-19 has obviously been significant. Right. Listening to the governor's comments about the Missouri economy, you can see on the bigger scale, a similar impact. In fact, the downturn that's developed here over the last 3 months at the national level actually is deeper than what we experienced in the great financial crisis back in 08 and 09. That's hard. It's hard to imagine because that was a difficult time. This has been much quicker, but let's look at a few of those statistics that kind of illustrate that point. The first would be in the first quarter, GDP, which was released here a couple of weeks ago, the national economy shrunk by about 5% on an annualized basis. That's a pretty tough quarter, but that's nothing like we're going to see in the second quarter. In fact, most of the estimates I've seen indicate a contraction on an annualized basis of 20 to 30% in the national economy, judging by GDP here in the quarter that we're in currently. Along with that, unemployment has risen to 15% in April, with more than 20 million jobs lost. So significant downturn. Those figures are all worse than what we saw in '08 and '09. There is some good news underneath that, though, in the sense that the economy and most companies were very healthy coming into this unexpected development,
Right.
and that should help us on the other side. That's very good news. And then we also are monitoring what are called high frequency data. So what this is are elements that are measured much more frequently, much more often. And some of those things would be mortgage applications, the number of people going through TSA checkpoints, hotel occupancy. And although those numbers are coming off a very low base, they're all rising pretty significantly here in recent weeks from those depressed lows. So there is a ray of sunshine there.
Well, that's great news, and that's actually something that I'm really glad you brought that up. I struggle because what we want some of those top line numbers, but they're almost all of them are such lagging indicators. You get them a month after they happen, and things are moving so fast right now. Those kinds of indicators, I haven't heard very many people referring to those, but they're valuable.
They are. They're very relevant. And the thing to keep in mind too, for investors, it's sometimes difficult to reconcile what's going on in terms of the economic data that's being presented versus what's happening in the markets. The thing to keep in mind is that economic data is telling you what happened last week or last month or over the last quarter. So it's what's happened already. The markets tend to be more focused on future expectations. So what we've seen in the stock market in the U.S., this kind of play out because we hit an all-time high in stock prices on February 19th,
Right.
before dropping. And this was the swiftest drop ever from an all-time high. The market entered bear market territory of a decline of 20% in about 3 weeks and ended up bottoming between February 19th and March 23rd, bottoming at a minus 35% return over that 5-week period. So very, very sharp decline. Now, since then, even though the economic data continues to worsen, we've recovered about half of that drop in value through today. And so why is that? Well, two important things. First, the government and the Federal Reserve Bank have applied trillions of dollars of stimulus to address the issues that we're having nationally right now, and that's been very important to stabilizing the financial markets, and will also help companies and businesses and individuals get over the worst of this crisis. So that's been very important. But also, investors are looking beyond the current crisis at what might happen in the second half of the year, and I think there's a fairly optimistic tilt to where the market trades right now in terms of this reopening being successful.
So a lot of your work is looking into a crystal ball in a sense, or it feels to some of us like that. There's a science to it. It's hard for many to follow, but you do this so well. And I guess I would ask, what advice do you have for people who are planning from an investment perspective? How do they, this is unprecedented. Nobody's seen how we got into something like this before. We don't know exactly how we get out of it because we haven't seen that either. How would you advise people in terms of their investment strategies right now?
That's a great question, Matt. And the degree of the drop in stock prices that we've seen this year is not unprecedented. In fact, this is the third time in the last 20 years we've had a similar size decline. They all happen for different reasons. This one came out of the clear blue, really. And during times like this, the number one most important thing for investors is to maintain discipline in what they're doing in their portfolio, because when you have the sort of volatility that we've had over the last few months, it's easy to get into an emotional decision-making process, and most often those emotional decisions are not the right decisions because they make you do things that you shouldn't do, and selling low and buying high in that spectrum. So it's very important. We've got still a pretty wide range of possible outcomes. I think once again, the market has embedded a pretty optimistic outcome of reopenings being successful, but I think that's the key factor as we get through the rest of this year, determining how the economy does and how the markets do as well. And don't forget, we're in an election year, which also usually causes additional volatility. So we have to be prepared for that, but stick with your portfolio discipline, and I think things will work out just fine. The one thing I would leave with is that The U.S. economy is the most dynamic and resilient in the world, and it wouldn't be prudent, in my opinion, to bet against it. We'll come back from this.
It's won every bet so
Yeah,
far,
it
hasn't it?
has.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks for your support and for lending your expertise today.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. You bet. Well, very glad to have that perspective and update, and of course for the support of BKD Wealth Advisors for Good Morning Springfield. And next up, we have an update that is a familiar face, has become a familiar face for us here at Good Morning Springfield, but also in our community. Clay Goddard, who is director of the Springfield Greene County Health Department, with a little bit of an update on where we are from a health perspective here. Clay, are you getting any rest? That's my first question for you.
I'm better caught up than I was last time.
Well, I'm
And
glad.
good morning to you. Good morning, Springfield.
It's an incredibly demanding period of time. I'm not joking about that. It's there, and you're on all the time. I mean, you and your team have done a tremendous job on this. One of the things before we get into questions, I just want to thank you and your team for is keeping your eye on the ball from a health perspective, and at the same time always recognizing that there are a lot of factors that go into that, and that's not easy to do in normal times, but especially in the middle of a crisis. Thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. We have an incredible team. We have an incredible community, and the way that we respond as a community makes me proud to be a Springfieldian and a member of this community. So I think that my hat's off to the entire community for what they've been able to accomplish together.
Well, Clay, I know you've been watching a lot of key metrics, and not just watching them, making them available to the public as well in a real-time way with the health department's dashboard and other. What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about right now? Where do we stand in our fight against the virus?
So let's talk about the dashboard. We currently have 104 total cases, 11 of which are active, meaning that they haven't been cleared from isolation. We're in a great place as a community. Our disease rates are relatively low compared to other communities our size across the state and across the Midwest. But really, case count, we have to be careful of using that as our only indicator. It really needs to be a lens in which we look at this disease. But we need to look at our capacity to deal with more cases. And as we reopen, that's certainly a danger. And so what we've tried to do is put together, indexes that show our healthcare capacity. So that means the capacity to deliver healthcare without going into crisis standard of care, our ability to contain the disease through quarantine and isolation and doing those disease investigations. And then the big one, which gets a lot of national attention, is our testing capacities. I'd like to expand a little bit on that one because we're above 9 on the gauges on healthcare capacities and containment, or public health capacities. The testing, we're at 6.3. So
10-point scale.
Yeah, so depending if you're an optimist or a pessimist, you might have anxiety about that. Especially if you watch the national dialogue about testing, there's a lot of talk about there not being enough. We're a little bit of an outlier in that regard, in that we have a lot of testing bandwidth here. That dial is lower because we aren't using, or we're using quite a bit of what we currently have the capacity to deliver. We still have the ability to stand up additional testing sites if we need, and we have the test kits to pull that off. So I think having that dial at 6.3 is actually a positive. It means that we're testing more and more people, and that's really our window into this disease currently as a community.
And people can go to the Springfield Greene County Health Department and take a look at these metrics anytime they want to. They're updated regularly. I have it on my phone, on my home screen, so I keep an eye on it there. We heard both the mayor and the governor talk about how as actual data begins to pile up, as we begin to actually get not models, but true counts, it helps really guide decisions. Can you talk a little bit about how those metrics that you're describing help us guide our decisions on how and how swiftly and in what ways to reopen the economy?
Well, I'm a public health guy, so I'm a big believer in evidence, and I think that evidence has to guide decision making, and we've tried to hold true to that through this entire process. So we use that evidence to, go into stay-at-home orders, and we want to use that to guide our journey as we start to try to get back to some semblance of normalcy with our economy and in our daily lives.
So you talked about testing, and of course, when people hear testing, for the most part, I think they think about diagnostic testing. If I have a symptom or two symptoms that are consistent with COVID, I want to get tested to find out if I have it. But there are other aspects of testing that both diagnostic, some creative ways you're handling that, and also some other forms of testing that you're doing might be helpful for the community to know about that too.
Sure. We've been very, very fortunate as a community that we got on this early. We had the first drive-through test site that was community facing in Missouri. I think Mercy St. Louis beat us by a day, and they were only testing Mercy patients in St. Louis. Ours was open to anybody who presented with multiple symptoms. And so that was a real benefit. And my hat's off to Cox Health and Mercy for being great collaborative partners in that regard. At one point, we had to wait maybe 2 weeks to get results back. Now it's very rare if it takes more than 48 hours to get your results. And we've been able to lower that qualification down to one symptom of COVID-19 makes you eligible to receive testing. But because we've had a wealth of testing assets, we've decided to start using those assets as disease surveillance. And that's very important because it gives us that window into the disease. We opened up 200 test kits for people who had been working during the stay-at-home orders in public settings, such as in grocery stores, convenience stores, and restaurants. And we have 150 of those tests back. No one's tested positive yet.
That's great news.
Yeah, it's great news. We were also concerned about what we had seen in Detroit and in St. Louis and New Orleans, where people of color were experiencing higher rates of infection. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't missing the mark there. So we worked with the NAACP, Prosper Springfield, and Caring Communities to establish some testing for African Americans in our community. Mm-hmm. We've offered 39 tests. We have 31 of those back, and we've had no positives there. We're going to continue to focus on communities that might have barriers to testing, who might have mistrust in institutions. And so our focus next is on our homeless community, on our Latino community, and we're looking for other opportunities to do this surveillance screening. That gives us further evidence. It lets us have a better sense of what's going on in our community and helps guide future decisions as regard to policy goes.
As you described that, Clay, that to me feels like an effort that is proactively getting out in front of potential spread risks. And I don't know very many communities that are that far along. Are we unique?
We're a bit of an outlier because we have had good access to testing. And also another thing to tell you about is thanks to the generous funding from the Missouri Foundation for Health, we are the first local public health lab in Missouri to offer COVID-19 testing. Now, that's not designated for the general public. We're going to use that as part of our disease epidemiology strategy. So if you test positive, we will immediately find out who you've been in contact with. We'll test all of them regardless of their symptoms and continue to do that concentric ring strategy until we've broken the chain of infection. It's really going to help us control disease in the future, and I'm very excited about that. It's a great tool, great intervention tool.
Great. Clay, thank you so much for your work, for your leadership, for your outstanding team and partnership in so many ways.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Clay. Impossible to really fully express the appreciation that our community has for the entire team in the health department and for all that they've done to help protect our community. And so at this point, I'd like to take a little time this morning to wrap up with a really important perspective from a small business member and volunteer leader on the chamber board, not just a small business member herself, but also one who interacts with, by the nature of her business, a lot of other businesses, a lot of other small businesses in our community. So I am so glad to welcome our chairman-elect of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, Logan Aguirre, who is not only leading in so many different ways, but there have been moments of inspiration through all of this that you've captured from throughout our community. Your job is telling stories and the strengths of 417 Land's business community and even helping us to launch a new hashtag while we're at it. So talk a little bit, Logan, if you would, about what you're seeing and hearing out there, and maybe how this is impacting your business too.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been like the Mount Rushmore of Springfield right now. And so I'm honored to even be like the person in the parking lot, maybe here at the end. But, you know, as a small business owner at the very beginning of this, I kept saying I felt like I was on outlaw run in the dark with no seatbelt.
It's a great ride, but
And
you don't want it for your
one of my
business.
favorite rides, but I prefer to be buckled in. And it felt like everyone that works for me was in it with me. And, you know, your why at that point becomes your people. And so we are really lucky at 417. We play the great game of business. And that has been really crucial to us right now. One of my favorite Jack Stack quotes that I keep going back to with my team is, honesty doesn't have to be easy, and it doesn't always have to be good news, but it is necessary and fair in every trusting relationship. Yeah. So we've just been doing a lot of honesty, open, transparent conversations, and really relying on the wisdom of our entire team and the brilliant minds there to help us navigate through this. And I think that's what a lot of businesses are doing right now, is leaning on their people and trying to take care of them as best they can.
I heard a piece of wisdom from somebody one time that said, "It's by the time you need a friend, it's too late to make one." I would sort of twist that just a little bit and say, by the time you need company culture, it's probably too late to create it.
Yeah.
You had been working on a great company culture there before we ever got to this point, and I'm sure it's paying off right now.
Well, we have an amazing group, and we've really just tried to stay connected and really just band together.
So much of what your team does is to interact with other businesses in our community. And so as you've stayed connected with your readers and with your clients to meet them where they are and also just understand their needs during this time, that's given you a lot of, I guess what I'd refer to as grassroots intelligence in all of this. You have your finger on the pulse. And as I mentioned, a new hashtag 417 strong, please use it. If you could talk a little bit about some of the examples of innovation that you have experienced and your team has seen as you've gone through this and observed.
You know, 417 Strong was really born out of, there's already so much bad news, and you can look anywhere and find case counts and bad news. So how do we find the good news and all the good things that are going on? And then there was just an overwhelming amount of that, because really 417 landers are so generous in their time and spirit and really pulling together to try to help their favorite small business get through this,
right.
And or help their neighbor get through this. And our current issue of Biz that just came out yesterday has dozens of stories of local small businesses that pivoted and tried to figure out, okay, is there equipment we can make to help the health systems? Is there a new product or service we could offer that would help sustain the business through this? And I think mostly they were focused on their people. And over, when you would talk to them, they'd say, I want to get my people through this. I want them to be safe, both from COVID and safe in job security. And I think that's really, really inspiring. And so 417 Strong is really just about trying to highlight those moments.
I've been struck by that same dynamic. I mean, small business owners are unique in many, many ways. And of course, that's most of the jobs in our community or any community are in small businesses. Man, they see these people are family. Yes. to small business owners. They feel a great personal responsibility. And one of the things that has really struck me through this whole period, the article you mentioned yesterday is a great one. I highly recommend it. I read it yesterday as well. Talk a little bit about this blog article that you recently published that I thought really captured. It's sort of a shout out to leaders who are in a position to make difficult choices and decisions with very little precedent, and what kind of support we can and ought to provide for them, and kind of all the mix of emotions that we go through while we're doing it. Can you talk a little bit about that blog and why you were motivated to write that?
Sure. The word that I keep thinking of is grace. Yeah. And I think that was the word that was in my mind most when I was writing it. And I've been so privileged as the chair-elect of the chamber to be able to really have a front row seat to the community dialogue at the community leadership level at the city and the county, and seeing how these decisions have been really thought through and really difficult to make because there's so many things at stake. And we talk about how collaborative we are, but then to really get a front row seat to watch that in action has been just really made me so proud. Yeah. It really is real. And when you think about the amount of decisions and the amount of things that they're having to work through at that level, it's really easy to make it all about you and what it feels like to you. But really, we need to have grace for each other Grace for people who choose to make different decisions, grace for ourselves when we're not our best, but really grace and gratitude to the city and county community leaders who they're creating what is this future story. In 100 years, when that mayor goes and digs it out of the archives, what is the story? And is it something that we can be proud to tell, like Mayor McClure is proud to tell what we learned from 100 years ago? So we're really writing that story right now as a community, and the more grace we can have for each other and for our leaders and some gratitude, can't imagine being in that seat. Yeah. And I think if, that was really the motivation, was just out of gratitude, and then maybe just trying to encourage others to have grace.
And I just remember, it's okay to be both, be brave and afraid at the same time. Yeah. That was great feedback. Thank you so much for it, Logan, and for your perspective and your dedication to this place we call home.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Logan. And thanks also to all of you today and this week and during these weeks that we've been through so much together, and for once again joining us for this second virtual edition of Good Morning Springfield. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, BKD Wealth Advisors, and our monthly sponsor, Borough Behavioral Health. And we are, of course, so grateful to the amazing team of professionals here at DNP for their ongoing support in helping us bring this program to you in this format, something that none of us really ever envisioned doing, but they've just been heroic in putting it together. A couple of quick announcements before we wrap up. Next week, we will have a call set up for our members, Public Policy Speaker Series, which is normally an in-person event, but it will be virtual, radio style, so you can call into that and listen to that program and ask questions along the way too. Our guest will be Missouri Department of Labor Director Anna Hugh. So if you have questions about unemployment or labor law or any of the impacts of all of this on the labor situation in Missouri, that's on May 20th at 1:30 p.m. You can watch for registration information via email for that. And next month's Good Morning Springfield will be a very important one. That's our State of the City on June 4th. We will stay in touch about the format for this event as well. And want to invite you, please, to be sure to visit our website, springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus, for updated information and recovery resources. And I want to thank you for making this a good morning, as you always do in Springfield. And thank you for inspiring us, chamber members, with your stories, with your innovation during this time, and with your perseverance as well. And I want to thank you for being a part of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce. The tide.